Thank you all for being on time. There was a little delay because we were trying to let everyone in from the waiting room, but almost everyone that's on here has been here since right on time. So thanks a lot for being here. Very, very excited to have this farmer forum with you all. I know there have been tons of questions since the annual meeting, before the annual meeting, about the Inflation Reduction Act, Section 22007, Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. And this series that we're starting today is going to continue every Wednesday at 12 Eastern, so that we can present to you all additional resources that are available to help you navigate your application for the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. And so we wanted to kick off the very first one with a very, very important leader in this work and from a very, very important organization. So Farmers Legal Action Group has been playing a critical role in assisting farmers, especially family farmers, navigating all of the challenges, whether it be weather, whether it be disaster, credit, all the various challenges that our family farmers encounter. Farmers Legal Action Group has been a strong resource, and very, very happy and lucky to have Stephen Carpenter here, who has a very storied history. He's usually really modest about talking about it, but hopefully I'll get him to answer some questions about that. Some of you might be familiar with him because he's supported the Federation for forever and played a very important role in the Pigford class action settlement. So Stephen's here, and I want to share with you all the resource that he and his colleague at FLAG have developed. But without further ado, I want to welcome you, Stephen. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to do work with the Federation. I got to go to EPS this year, so that was a highlight, and so just looking forward to trying to get people a little piece of justice here. So, and I'm happy to do what Dania, whatever seems to help, I'm happy to do.
Great, thanks so much. So before we get started, could you just share a little bit of your backstory and how you've gotten into this work, and where you see the experiences that you had with your role with the Pigford litigation, and what you've developed in terms of the resource that you've developed for the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program?
Sure. Actually, that's not often asked. Sure. I grew up in a little farm in Missouri in an all-white small community, but was a young adult during the farm crisis and saw a lot of bad things go down. And so when I ended up going to law school, I thought, okay, I'm going to go back and kind of fight the man. And I ended up at Farmers Legal Action Group, and broadened my horizons considerably when I began to understand, working with folks like at the Federation and in Indian country, the sort of the sort of deeper levels of inequality in agriculture. And so I've been trying to do my part on those issues all along. The Pigford case, it's almost hard to talk about because it did a lot of good things. That is to say, money went in the right direction, about $1 billion, but there were a lot of problems. And so what I ended up doing was working with the court. I helped the monitor, was her senior counsel. And so one of the things that we tried to do was really make sure people got the relief that they were deserving. And we also, if anyone who remembers, there was a sort of an appeal system in Pigford. So you sent your appeal to the monitor, and then we decided if we thought there had been an error, and if we did, we sent it back to the decision maker. And And we found with the farmer more than half the time, and 90% of those times, the decision maker agreed with us. So we went through a lot of records, a lot of decisions, a lot of reading about and talking to people about discrimination. So one thing that we're trying to do here, which Flag does a lot of, is write some basic materials that help people understand their situation, and then you can kind of look up things if you need. We have a 4-pager that I think we're going to share here in a second. And right after Labor Day, we're going to produce a really long version of this, which we hope will help people answer the questions they might have. I mean, in something like this, the devil is in the details. So we're really trying to work through all the details so you can have a resource to look up, what does this question really mean? What is the rule? What are they talking about, right? How do I show I was actually a farmer? And so we hope that's going to be a useful thing, and happy to talk to anybody anytime about questions they have. Happy to do this event again, whatever makes sense.
Thanks so much. And I really appreciate you sharing that, broader picture and the scope of your career, because I think it really makes a difference when there are resources that are developed by folks who have the legal expertise that you have, but also the cultural competence. I think that's one of the biggest assets that, as a friend, I see that you have. I've observed where you've really been a champion for underrepresented communities, and in particular in all of the ways that we've advocated for this program to be the best version of what we could have. And so just wanted to make sure that especially the folks that are on this call that have not been longtime members of the Federation are aware that you've been doing this work for a really long time. But since you mentioned the 4-pager, I'm going to share it in the chat. And if you could, you gave a little bit of a flavor for what the purpose of this document is. But if you could just kind of, as I share this link in the chat right now, walk us through the process of developing it, and kind of, if you could kind of take us through that document, that would be extremely helpful. And I'm going to share
Sure, so maybe take 2 or 3 minutes here to 2 or 3 minutes and kind of go through the document.
Please, yes. And I'm going to share the screen for those who are watching it and can't click the link right now. So I'll share the screen and it'll be up while you're describing it.
Excellent. So let's say first things first, so we have a program here for people who have experienced discrimination in FSA farm loan programs. And the first thing to remember is you have a deadline here to apply. You have to apply. And that deadline is October 31st. This is a congressional program. That is to say, Congress created this program. It's not a lawsuit. So there are no class counsel. There are no lawyers taking fees. There's none of that. It's going to feel like it if you ever participated in the older lawsuits, and the forms are long, and so it kind of feels like it, but it is different. And so USDA is kind of calling the shots here. Congress created the program, and we could all disagree with some aspects of what they've come up with, but here we are, and we're going to try to make the best of it. So basically, you got $2.2 billion out there for everybody to distribute to farmers that can show they experience discrimination. And the first thing to say, and the biggest question is right away, is like, well, who's eligible for this? So let's break that down just for a second. So we get to Roman numeral 3. Okay. So really, you have 2 kinds of eligibility. And one, the first one is going to be over 95% of all the people. And so here it is. You must have experienced discrimination in a USDA farm loan program. And that discrimination needed to have occurred before January 1st, 2021. So let's Let's think about that for a second. You've experienced discrimination at banks. That doesn't count, I'm sorry to say, um, unless there was a rule by USDA. So you had discrimination in other USDA programs, conservation programs, disaster programs. That also doesn't count. We're focusing here just on the farm loan programs, whether you try to get an operating loan, a real estate loan. The discrimination needs to have been by USDA in one of these loan programs. And so that if you think about it, that's going to be the direct loans. If direct loans, USDA is the lender. Guaranteed loans, it's from a bank or other institution, but USDA backs up the loan with a guarantee. For our purposes for this application, the only way a guaranteed loan works is if it was USDA that did the discriminating, not the bank. Again, we would all do this differently if we probably could, but this is what we have. So then there's a second piece of it that makes some people eligible, and that is what we call here assigned or assumed debt. So what that means is that if you had, let's say, a relative who had an FSA loan, was discriminated against in the mid 2010s, 2015, that person passed, and you ended up holding, let's say that person was your grandfather, you holding your grandfather's loan, and your grandfather was experienced discrimination in 2015 when that loan was made, and now you hold that loan, you can apply. So let's repeat that again. Granddad had a loan in 2015 with USDA. Granddad was discriminated against. That loan survives and you now hold it. It was assigned to you or you assumed it. Those are sort of legal terms, which mean it's your loan now. And you can file a claim, you can file in this process. And what you're talking about when you do is the discrimination your granddad faced. So we have two groups of people here. You either experienced discrimination directly, or it was somebody else experiencing the discrimination, and you now hold their loan. One of the things that, if you think about this, see if you can see this, that means no estate claims. And that's a rough one, right? Because we know that one of the things discrimination does is interrupt accumulation of intergenerational wealth. So back to the example of granddad, if he experienced discrimination over and over, and it was really obvious, and he won in Pigford, and now he could have done another case, another process, that's gone. You cannot file a claim, you can't file an application based on the discrimination faced by somebody who's passed away. It's just, that's what the rules are. And with this tiny little exception we just talked about, where the loan itself survives. So that's our rough summary of discrimination. Obviously we can, Dania and I can talk about any details of this. So who can file this application? In other words, as a lawyer would say, what are the bases of discrimination here? And it's a familiar list. It's race, gender, ethnicity, or what people generally call national origin, sex, disability. It's that sort of familiar list that we've heard. The thing that I would say is that they went broad here. So they're including marital status. It's a gender identity, right? So as we know, sexuality and gender is changing in this society for the past 15 years. If you walked into a USDA office and they said women can't farm, or they say what are gay people doing in agriculture, or they think you're transgender, that is all discrimination. And you have just as much of a right to apply as anybody else. I mean, I know with this group, it's a lot of focus, rightly so, on race. But let's not forget there are other forms of discrimination, including, let's, if we can go intersectional just for a second, including as your status as a woman. I mean, it easily can be, the discrimination is really about your gender. So you get to pick, you decide, but my point here I want to emphasize is it's not just race, it's not like Pittsford or the second Black farmer case, it's broader than that. So all those folks out there who feel like there was discrimination, I feel like this is a pretty good list of ways that you can argue that there was discrimination. You're going to have to show in your application that there was discrimination. And that means you were treated differently based on these things that we just talked about, your race, your gender, etc. Treated differently because of that. So as we say here, there doesn't have to be a smoking gun here. You don't have to be called a racist name. You don't have to be told flat out, you can't apply because of this or that. What you do have to do is show you were treated differently. And that can mean you should have got a loan, but you didn't. And other people were able to get loans much more easily. Or your terms of your loan were harsher than they needed to be. That sounds hard, and it is something you're going to have to work on to explain. But what lawyers would call the burden of proof, or what USDA likes to call the burden of evidence here, because they don't want you to think about this as a lawsuit, and it is not a lawsuit. Your burden of proof or burden of evidence here is actually very low. It's what lawyers call substantial evidence. And substantial evidence means that a reasonable person could believe discrimination took place. Let's say that again. A reasonable person could believe that there was discrimination. So it doesn't have to be like a criminal case where beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't even have to be the level of proof that you would be required for a normal civil suit, which would be a preponderance of evidence. You hear it described in various ways, or 51% likelihood, right? Substantial evidence is very, very low. It just means a reasonable person could believe. So you do have to show discrimination. The burden is very low. So when you hear people say, oh, you've got to prove your discrimination, it's true, but your burden is very, very low. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a big pile of documents, if you don't have, as we would say, a smoking gun. Tell your story, provide the documents you can, and you're going to have, I think, a good shot. Let me say a couple of things about the application, and it's long, but you can do it. There are three things, actually. One is you want to provide as many details as you can. Tell the story of your life as a farmer or attempting to farm and of your discrimination. Fill in every detail you can. The details are what's going to convince another human being out there that's never going to meet you that this discrimination was real. And you can and don't go light on this, because it's easy for people to think, oh, cattle operation, what was that? What does this all mean? Say the details. Say you had 25 Angus cows and wanted to get a bull and some more heifers, and they deny you the loan. Like, give the details. You need to show you farmed. Tell what you did, or you tried to farm, and say how you were set up. USDA also loves to see documents, and these documents are important in a couple of instances, because some of them you have to have, like you have to prove your identity, fair enough. But some of them you don't have to have, but they are extremely helpful, because what they do is show that you actually farmed or that you actually had a loan. If you have any of those are great. And documents you wouldn't think would ever be important can help show, for example, that you farmed. Just a check you wrote to the get your tractor repaired, or to buy grain for the cattle, or to buy seed or herbicide. All of that goes to show you farmed. which you're going to have to show. We know who has a lot of documents about your farming operation if you ever dealt with USDA, and that is USDA. And there's a system here where you can ask for those documents. You'll see in front of you, if you're able to look at the screen, you can ask USDA for these documents, and the deadline is no longer September 6th, it's September 29th. So you can ask for those documents later. We'll update this later. I know I'm going long, Dania. Getting close here. So you can ask, there's an email where you ask them for those documents. I wanted to say just a couple of things more. One is you can get help with these. You're on this call because you're familiar with the Federation. The Federation can help you. There are other, what we're calling cooperators out there, Rural Coalition, Intertribal Agriculture Council, other people that work with farmers all the time and can help you with this application. USDA has also hired vendors, and it's their job to help you. And they have offices. If you get a hold of this 4-pager or you go to USDA's website, you can find these other vendors. And I would encourage you to get some help. This is a doable application, but you can't do it at the last minute. And it probably makes sense to get someone to help you sort of arrange your thoughts, tell them in a good order, and kind of explain it all. The last thing I wanted to tell you is that it's going to be no surprise to anybody here that scam artists are kind of coming out of the woodwork. They want to tell people, oh, give me some money and I'll promise you'll get this USDA payment. Or we have lawyers out there. You know, I hate to say anything bad about lawyers because it makes Dania look bad. And me too. But seriously, you do not have to have a lawyer for this. There are lawyers out there that want to sign you up and take a big chunk of your payment as if they did a bunch of work, and as if it was like a tobacco lawsuit that required 2 decades for them to figure out. No, this is a process. I'm not saying don't use a lawyer if you want to, but please read these agreements they're having people sign really closely. There's no way it's justified for the lawyer to take 1/3 of your payment. None. You can get help elsewhere at no charge that's really competent. I don't even trust these lawyers to know what the heck is going on, yet they want 1/3 of your money. So anybody tells you they can promise they'll get you money, they are, to use the precise legal term, lying to you. So with that, sorry, Dania, I know I'll say again I went long, but
no, not at all. That was perfect. Like you couldn't have, I couldn't have scripted that better. That was so helpful. Those points, I think that 4-pager is a really valuable resource. It covers the main questions that we receive on pretty much a daily basis. So I'm really excited that we're able to share that resource and make it available to everyone that's watching. It's on FLAG's website and it will be on the Federation's website. I see that there are a couple questions in the chat, and so I wanted to kind of turn the rest of the time over to our and viewing audience. And so I see that someone in the chat asked, he said the last day to request it is September 26th or 29th, and someone said they believe it's the 29th, but for the record, can you restate the current deadline?
29. So it went from September 6th to September 29th. But your deadline to file is still October 31 to send in the application.
Great, thank you. And I see that Stephen has also dropped his email address into the chat, scarpenter@flaginc.org, for those of you who are listening by phone. If you have questions, Stephen is a really, really wonderful resource. He's kind of seen it all in a matter of speaking. And so he's available. We partner together to be available to answer your questions. I see another question in the chat. Can we as contractors put our direct office here? And Jacqueline, can you come off of mute and just clarify what you mean by contractors?
Well, there are those that have been positioned to help those that have been discriminated against, and we have phone numbers that and we have an office. I'm in Texas, so for the people that are on this line, would it be appropriate to put an additional number to contact us directly?
So are you working with the Federation, or are you, or who?
Yes.
So you're a Federation contractor?
Mhm.
For Texas. Okay,
Right.
yes, sure. There's so many, that word contractor, there's a lot of different folks with that role. But yes, Jacqueline, if you are one of the Federation's contractors assisting folks with applications and technical assistance in Texas, if you would share your contact information, I do think that would be of help, as long as you clarify that you're assisting folks in the state of Texas. I think that would be a helpful resource. I did want to just remind you all that there will be, including the flag resource that we're talking about today, a lot of the frequently asked questions that we get at the Federation, as well as the contact information for all of those folks who have been brought on board to help with applications. All of that will be on our website. So you can go ahead and drop that in the chat, Jacqueline, but we will also make sure that all of the resources that can help you complete this application are available to you on the Federation website. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but Tisha, you're a partner via are you one of the cooperators? Can you come off chat and just clarify what your role is, please?
I sure can. Thank you so much. I certainly want to thank Stephen as well. This is Ms. Tisha Jackson. I'm with the Windsor Group, LLC, and we are one of your partners. So we are one of the outlets that can certainly assist over 29 states with the application, and regional offices are available for any assistance. And I know you're going to share our information already.
Yes,
Thank you.
but you could also share in the chat. The chats are where
Thank
we
you.
kind of pull frequently asked questions, and that gives us a better assessment of what the resources are that folks need. So that would be really helpful to drop that in the chat as well. Thanks so much for being here, Tisha.
Thank you. Absolutely. I will just mention all information in behalf of Windsor is on USDA's website as well. Okay,
Fantastic.
thank you.
Thank you. And I see that there is a question that's directed towards Stephen. Would you specifically speak to the document for property ownership? Should we use a number or copy of the deed?
Yeah, thanks, Grafty. That's a good question. One of the things that the application does is says, well, were you a landowner? And if you were, they want some kind of a proof. And so they ask, for example, well, do you have a farm number? But here's the thing to remember. You can use all kinds of different ways to show that you own land, or for that matter, that you farmed. And so as Grafty, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, McDaniels. So if you have a copy of title or deed, that's beautiful. If you have records that show you pay taxes on it, that also works. I know in a lot of counties, if you own the land, the real estate taxes are online. I mean, I know that's not everywhere, but you can go online, look up the property, and I would just like print a copy of that, or if you're able to download it, that shows that you own the land. Actually, even if you like don't own the land anymore and you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure I have anything here, old checks that you wrote to for your property tax, for example, or mortgage payments. If you have an old mortgage document, All those things go to show that you own property. Now, USDA would seem to like to have the farm number. If you have it, that's great. If you have it, so you've got a loan or you did a conservation program, there'll be a farm number involved there. Not everybody has a farm number though. Not all land has a farm number because the land hasn't been used by a farmer for USDA programs. Farm number is completely a USDA thing. Lots and lots of farmland has it, not everything. So that one works really well too. I hear some people begin to think, oh my gosh, I've got to have a farm number. I don't know where it is. I don't know if we even have it. No, all you have to do if you're trying to make this point is show that you own the land. A farm number is convenient for USDA, and it's one of the things you could ask for. You know, if you know that you filled out forms and paperwork to get a disaster payment or to do anything else with USDA, you almost for sure have a farm number in there. You use their email system to try to get a copy of something that you sent in and say, oh, I applied for disaster assistance in the drought year, whatever, right? Take it all the way back, 88, right? I mean, whatever your experience was where you know you dealt with them, ask for that. And we're hoping that they come through with some documents that we asked for. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you so very much.
So while more questions get generated for the chat, because I see this one from Belinda is about contractors in Oklahoma. And I think that might be, I think that might be a question for the Federation or probably more appropriately for the Windsor group. But Tisha, could you speak to whether or not there are folks working with the Windsor group in Oklahoma?
That might be analytical acquisitions, Dina.
Okay.
Is Windsor person here?
Well, she was. I
am, Mr. Stephen. I was trying to pull it up to actually see Danielle, and if she puts her information in the chat box, I can respond back via email. And I put my information in there as well.
And I'm sharing in the chat right now the link to the USDA page that has all of the groups that are, whether it's one of the regional hubs, the national administrator, all of the USDA cooperators, so organizations like FLAG, Federation. So that last link that I just dropped into the chat, you can find links to all of the contact information for all of those groups in that chat. I do see that there's another question in the chat. Is the Windsor group available to review completed applications?
Yes. We're available to review, assist along the way, the 10 steps. We're available to assist to put it in online, and we are the regional hub that hard copy would actually be mailed to.
So Stephen, I had a question for you as you were speaking, and I know that we've gotten a lot of questions about estates. It looks like that message has been effectively communicated because we usually have a lot of hypotheticals about that. But in terms of you saying that it's a reasonable person standard, and you said that that's a lower standard, how would that kind of play out in the review of someone's application, that burden of evidence is lower than we might think of when we're thinking of a different type of civil litigation?
It is such a good question, and I wish I had a good answer. The reality is we don't really know. I mean, they're going to hire some people and hopefully train them well who are going to look at thousands of these applications. So what I hope they do, and I would like to think they will do, is sit down and read through the application and decide whether it really kind of holds together. One of the things that we have to worry about here is that with the old discrimination cases, people kept talking about fraud. And so people, for example, who, if there was more than one application in the same handwriting, or if there were people that lived near one another who described very similar operations. Some of those people, I think quite unfairly, got tagged with a fraud concern. So what you really, really need to do, in my view, is to tell your story in detail. I know I mentioned this once, but nobody will think it was a mass-produced application if you really talk about where the farm was, what you intended to do with the loan money if you were denied. You know, we were growing fruits and vegetables. We had a chance to rent additional land. There was, you know, it was already organically certified, so we were going to be able to market organic. Like, tell the whole story of what you were doing, how you were ready to take advantage of the loan, where the land was if you're going to buy land, where your markets were if you were going to do a specialty crop. Those, if you should start adding in enough of those details, no reasonable person would think this was some sort of a mass-produced system to cheat. I mean, I'm just going to say it, and I don't need to say here, but I'm just going to say it. There are people looking over the shoulder of this process who think somewhere somebody's going to cheat this system, and it's unfair, but that's our reality. And what we have to do is make sure, through our use of documents when we find them, and through the use of our story that really hangs together of the experiences, that will convince a reasonable person there's somebody behind this. This is somebody's experience. This is not just a mass-produced thing. So I think actually, you know, the documents are important because they help support your argument. But to me, details are what will convince a person, again, that you've never met and are never going to meet, that doesn't know anything about you, that this story of experience is for real. That's my take on it. And I wish we knew a little bit better. I don't know, Danielle, what would you add to that? I mean,
I think that was great, but I think it connects to, I've heard you make a point about, you know, in terms of adding details. What if you're telling your story and you can't quite remember if it was 2007 or 2005 that you went into the office? So we want to tell, like you said, a story that are reasonable, so a non-legally trained layperson like yourself or someone in your community who did not go to law school, isn't a judge, but you're telling this person your experience. They might not have an ag background. They might not understand how USDA programs, hypothetically, they might not understand how applications to USDA's credit programs work, and you're trying to put in the details. But I've heard you talk before about one of the risks of guessing on details, and can you just expand on that?
sure. I guess maybe one way to put it is, don't overstate. If you think it was in the late 2000s, say it was the late 2000s, because the danger if you go a little bit beyond that is that USDA may well have the records, and they say, well, this person says it was 2008. But really it wasn't until 2010. They're very likely to hold that against you. So it sounds simple and we're sort of threading a needle here, but say what you know, and don't be afraid to be general when you don't know, but tell what you know happened. Because overstating is, again, a way to give them an excuse to deny you, even though 98% of what you say is exactly correct. Would be again my suggestion. Don't be shy about saying you don't remember something, but do include what you do remember.
So I know that all of you attended to get more information on this process, and Stephen has done a fantastic job of outlining that resource. We've put into the chat other ways that you can get in contact with folks that can assist you. Farmers Legal Action Group's website is in the chat. The Federation's DFAP, Dedicated Discrimination Financial Assistance Program page, is in the chat. I've shared on here also where you can get local assistance, the last chat link that I just shared. And I do see Oklahoma listed as analytics. What is it? Analytics acquisitions. So if you're looking for assistance, I also see on that list on the last link that I just shared that Oklahoma Black Historical Research Center is one of the cooperators through the Rural Coalition, which is a direct cooperator under this program. So for those of you who can see the chat, that you go ahead and click whichever links are relevant to you, but we want you to also know that this chat will be captured on that Federation webpage that I've shared. There's another chat that says, what if someone requests their file or information from the USDA and they don't have records? Are they obligated to keep files from so far back to current?
That is a really good question too. Here's what we know. USDA has rules that say after a period of time, they should destroy written documents. Do they always do it? No. And so a lot of those records will go to the National Archive. National Archive has been in the news because, as we know, the president's documents didn't go to the National Archive. They went to the restroom where people read them while at the commode, I guess. But I'm sorry for that, but your documents may well have been destroyed, especially if they're a long time ago. What USDA should have, though, if you actually got a loan, is there should be electronic records that show when you got the loan, when you paid it off, what happened. That they're telling us that they will search those computer records, and so that should come up. I'm worried that the USDA searches won't turn up everything they should. So I feel strongly as a recommendation that you try to find other documents that make the same point. I would use this system. I'm not doubting that USDA won't try to find the records, but we just don't know how good of a job they're going to be able to do. So try to do both. Like I would always definitely ask them, but know that there could be a glitch. And know that first of all, if you never did an application, there may be no record at all. If they discouraged you, there's no record of that. Or even if you got denied and never got a loan, I think there's a decent chance there'll be no records to show that. So if you for a denial, for example, you may not have a record. That's where it's important to tell your story in detail. You can also get if somebody else knows that you were denied and they can remember that, you can get a statement from them that says under penalty of perjury, yes, I remember she tried to get a loan in 1984 and they denied her and it was unfair because they said she didn't have enough collateral, but she really did, and get someone to sign that. That's great. That's really valuable. Now, for these denial statements, it has to be somebody that's not a relative. I will say that. And I think also as a part of that question, as I'm thinking about it, is someone asked, I was denied in 1984, am I eligible? So part of the answer to that question is this goes all the way back. So we've got some elderly folks out there that were tangled up with USDA in the 80s. You are perfectly eligible for this. God bless you if you kept records. But even if you didn't, I would encourage you to tell your story with a lot of details. There's no starting point. If you're alive and you experience discrimination, you have every right to apply. And those were rough years, the early 80s. So I hope that the people making the decisions sort of understand that.
So one question that I haven't seen come up in the chat, but I had posed to me yesterday, and I'm just kind of comparing my notes with you, Stephen. So someone asked, what if someone was a Pigford Track B successful claimant that received $500,000 to settle their claim? Could that person apply for financial assistance under this program?
Yes. Your experience in the other discrimination cases, there are several of them. There's 2 black farmer cases, Hispanic and women ended up in a claims process. Native American had a settlement as well. And people on this call may have participated in all of those. If you applied in one of these other cases or processes, you can definitely apply for this. If you didn't apply in one of these other processes, you can apply. It doesn't stop you from applying in any way. So please go ahead and apply without it mattering whether you did the old cases or not. In addition, I think if somebody is like this person described, they won, that actually goes a long way to show that there was discrimination. So I think don't hide that. Say exactly what happened. It's really it sounds simple, but I think with a lot of this stuff, it's not worth it to try to not tell all the facts. Say that you won, because that's almost overwhelming proof that discrimination occurred. Now, what will happen if you won in one of the other cases is that USDA says it will reduce your payment in this program. But for everybody if you're an old timer, you'll remember this whole thing. If you went track A in Pigford and won, USDA is saying that almost automatically makes you eligible for money in this. It shows that there was discrimination. You just have to prove that you are eligible for this program and all the other ways that eligibility is required. But if you won in these other cases, you will very, very likely be able to get a payment in this one too. They just may reduce it some. They probably will reduce it some because you got this other money. But I would suggest don't let that stop you. I don't think they're going to take people down to 0. They're going to say, this shows there was discrimination. This program was designed to help. We'll dock you a little bit for what you already got, but you're very, very likely to get a payment, is my take on it.
And that was exactly what I said. I'm really glad. I probably should have called you first, Stephen, but I feel like I've talked to you about this so much that I thought that was what you would say. So I'm glad that that's the correct answer in your view as well. And we're just about 10 minutes out from the wrap up of this session. I do see that we have Nia with her hand raised. You can come off mute and ask your question, Nia.
Sorry, hello. I had a quick follow-up question to the Pickford question. I know there were 2 tracks to Pickford, one of which I can't exactly remember the lettering, but one of which was a guaranteed like $50,000, and one of which was kind of a court process that you could either, receive what you deserved or get no money at all. And I think people I've talked to were really discouraged from participating in that. And so although they did receive money, definitely less than deserved. So I wonder if like the track that they decided to take in their Pickford case might affect their funding as well.
So you have a very good memory. There was a track A and a track B. If you had success in track A, you got $50,000 automatically, and then you got $12,500 sent to your tax account. If you did track, you sort of either got $50,000 or nothing. If you were in track B, it was more like, as you just said, a real trial. It was an arbitration, and you could get an unlimited amount. But actually lots of people got 0 due to lawyering and other difficulties. But you could get quite a significant number in track B. So how does that affect the situation for people now? I think if you won in either one, it's great, because it means that if you can just show you're eligible, you will succeed in this program too. If you lost in a track B, it's meaningless, because track B was an arbitration with a very high burden of proof, preponderance of evidence. So you could perfectly well, with no inconsistency, have lost in your Pigford track B, and you should win now. It's because what you can show will meet this, what we call the substantial evidence test. And substantial evidence, again, means a reasonable person could believe. So that's easier to get to than the preponderance of evidence that was required for track B Pigford. I know we're getting a little into the details here, but if you think about track A, which is almost everybody, if you won in track A, you're automatically going to get a finding that there was discrimination when you do this program. If you lost in track A, it should also actually be meaningless, because there are all sorts of reasons you might have lost. You didn't fill out your form very well. You were late. You forgot to sign something. I mean, the possible reasons people lost in track A would blow your mind, again, to use a legal term, that have nothing to do with whether discrimination took place. So don't be scared that because you didn't succeed in track A, you shouldn't do this. This is a real shot, and you're not at all prevented from applying now.
I really, really appreciate both that question and that answer, because we don't want folks to just, take any of the information that we're giving as far as the eligibility for you to interpret us as discouraging anyone from applying. It's going to come down to, like Stephen said, the details of your experience. For example, if you are both a Black single woman and you have a really terrible credit score, right? Like, you're going to have to be able to show why it was you being a Black single woman as opposed to the evaluation just of your credit score. So when you're telling your story, be very, like Stephen has said it so many times, I'm so grateful that he's said it so methodically, because that is going to be really important. Like I said, the people that are reviewing these applications, they're not necessarily licensed attorneys or judges or folks who are very knowledgeable about the experience of applying for a farm service agency loan. So the details are really, really going to matter. And if you do have something that you think might, like whether or not you were successful in the Pigford lawsuit, like Stephen said, even if you think that that could weigh against you, and we're telling you that it wouldn't weigh against you, put that information in there, because in relation to those prior lawsuits, it's actually going to strengthen the fact that you've been telling this same story consistently for a really long period of time. That is going to weigh in your favor. It's not going to cut against you. I see we have 5 minutes left, and there's one more question in the chat. If you have any more questions, please be sure to drop them in the chat. But just a reminder, we will be hosting these every single week on Wednesday at 12 Eastern. But we have a question that says, what if you're no longer farming due to losing your farm equipment? Can you still apply?
The answer from Mr. Scott is, Willie Scott, is absolutely yes. There's no requirement that you have to be farming now. You just, if you got a loan, and it sounds like you did, and were farming, you just need to show you were farming then. And that can include just loan papers. They show that you were farming because you got a loan to farm. So with an example like this, you would want to explain as clearly as you can the discrimination that took place. So let's say, for example, that you got a little bit behind on your payments. USDA loan programs have all sorts of ways that they can try to help you out of that trouble if they chose to use them. They could reschedule your loan. They could, which extends it out. They could defer your payment, let you pay later. They can do, they can do what's called a subordination if you're having problems with other lenders. There's a long list of things that they should have done, but often did not do for farmers of color. And so you would explain what happened to you. So for example, if they just wrote you a quick letter and suddenly showed up to repossess the equipment, that is not what they should have done. That's against their rules. And when they act against their rules, that's beginning to prove that they treated you differently based, I'm just going to guess, Mr. Scott, based on your race, but it could for any of the other reasons that are involved here. So the short answer to your question is no, you do not need to be farming now. It's equal to any other application that you once farmed and were discriminated against. You can be long past farming at this moment, or maybe you're not long past, you want to farm again. None of it matters. It's just whether discrimination took place at the time.
Thank you so much. Great question. And so what I'd like to do in our last 2 minutes, obviously, thank you so much, Stephen, for being here. I will absolutely take advantage of the offer that you made to come back on another week, because this has been incredibly helpful. I just wanted to bring attention to folks as we wrap up. I'm placing back in the chat one last time the link to the resource that Stephen walked us through. And when the new resource, the longer resource, which I've gotten a sneak peek at, and it's fantastic. I feel like everyone should read it as soon as it comes out. This 4-pager is a teaser, and it kind of hits the highlights. It gets you what you need to know right up front. The longer document, I think that anyone could pick up, any farmer could pick up and get their grandkids to help them get online and complete the application successfully. It is very comprehensive, very thorough, very accessible language. And so as soon as that is available and Flag puts it out, we're going to share it, and we're definitely going to invite Stephen back. But in the meanwhile, here's the shorter 4-page document that Stephen just went over. I wanted to drop again in the chat just because there's been so much activity that Stephen's email is there. And for those of you who are listening by phone, it's scarpenter@flaginc.org. And I did add also, I know there's been a couple of folks who've introduced themselves as partners. We've had folks on here from our regional office, our outreach office in Texas. We've had a representative from the Windsor group. And I just wanted to completely be clear that the list that I've dropped in here comes directly from USDA, that these groups that we've addressed and I've put here in the chat, those are the only groups that are USDA approved partners. And because, like Stephen mentioned, there is that concern about scams and fraud, we want to make sure that if you're not sure, if someone has approached you or approaches you in the coming weeks and offers to provide you assistance on this application, it's a red flag if they tell you that they want to charge you money. And you should reach out to one of these resource groups to clarify if you have any questions, whether that is a legitimate group. But you can always go to this USDA website for yourself. So the national administrator of the program is the Midtown Group. The regional hubs are Analytic Acquisitions and the Windsor Group. The Windsor Group is handling almost all of the region that the Federation affects. And so we are really closely working with the Windsor Group, but some of the other cooperators, just a quick shout out so you hear the names for those of you who are participating by phone, are Agribility, Farmer Veteran Coalition, Farmers Legal Action Group, Federation of Southern Cooperatives, Intertribal Agriculture Council, Land Loss Prevention Project, National Young Farmers Coalition, and Rural Coalition. And Rural Coalition has under it a variety of organizations that are members of the Rural Coalition. But I wanted to specifically call out all the resources that are approved USDA resources. So you don't have to go it alone. But if you decide to go it alone, I definitely want to amplify this resource that Stephen has already shared and the one that Flag is developing. And we're here for you as your federation, always available to answer those questions. So with that, thanks again so much, Stephen, for being here. And thank you all for your time. Take care.